All right. So we're ready to start with this webinar. Very exciting, another installment of Table Manners for Robots. Today, we have two very esteemed guests. As always, on the show, we're able to get some really good people to give us advice and to give us some good tips, practical tips that are built on lots of practical experience. We often don't like the idea of just theorists who provide an intellectual debate. We really want practical solutions, and we want people who are on the ground helping clients, working with real life problems in the South African context. So that's really what we're focusing on. We are lucky to have today our first guest is Andy, and he is a veteran executive. He runs a very successful mid-sized company. He has 36 years of deep experience working with customers. He is himself a financial expert. He was a financial manager for two companies in the duration of his career, and now he runs a successful medium-sized business as a managing director. We also have with us today Andy's counterpart, Rhiedwaan, who has 2 decades of experience as a professional. He is the co-owner of their business. He as well has deep on-site experience with clients, and collectively as a team, they have directly worked on themselves or via their teams. They've worked with about 50 clients. So they've seen multiple scenarios. They've seen many different ways of doing things with regards to financial management and managing costs and aspects to do with finance. So as a collective, we're very, very happy to have them on the show, giving their ideas, giving their advice. And I really hope that you use this opportunity together with me to get a lot of valuable information from them. So without further ado, let's go right into the questions and answers. And then for the attendees, just remember that the questions will be open throughout the event. So at any point, feel free to just go to your question section and just submit a question. Our moderators will submit it to me, and then I will announce the question and we'll get it answered. So we're not going to just do questions at the end. We actually have questions running throughout the event. So let's kick off. Andy, Rhiedwaan, very warm welcome officially now that we're live on air. Let's start, Andy. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I'm originating from Zimbabwe, where I grew up and went to school and began my career in finance and IT. I won't say exactly which decade that was, but yeah, I cut my teeth there in the manufacturing industry and did a part qualified as a CMA in Zim before I moved on to London, where I spent 3 years in a slightly different industry, in the diamond industry. So it was based in Hatton Gardens. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but yeah, it was very interesting and very different to being in a manufacturing environment. But nevertheless, very similar business and financial principles applied. From there, I moved to Cape Town in the early 90s because the wine and surf beckoned me here, and you can't get better than that. So yeah, and then essentially I was involved in a financial manager position for 5-6 years here in Cape Town before I decided to move on to my own. But with that, I've always been in the IT sector, and the IT was key role in all financial positions that I played. So they've always gone hand in hand. And it's taught me a lot from both perspectives, from an IT perspective, but also from a financial perspective, how one can utilize both to one's best. And it's helped our business as well. So from going through some tough stages in the early years, I've had to learn how to use IT and finance to make us successful and keep going. And again, now in this situation as we have with COVID, we're having to watch and do these things just as much as thinking any other business out there. So yeah, that's where we are at.
Thank you, Andy. Rhiedwaan, how about you? Tell us about your background.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear it's buckling down over here. It's actually making quite a bit of noise. But yeah, Rhiedwaan been involved in, well, this specific business with Andrew for the last 16, 17 years. You know, I end up being the man on the ground, basically getting my hands dirty, understanding the processes of people, and what different businesses. And yeah, I'm father of 4. So I have a busy life. In between managing, getting involved with business and dealing with 4 kids. So yeah, especially in this times of COVID, part-time teacher as well at the moment. So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. Many things that our parents have to do at this stage. So well done, and thank you for joining us. So let's open it up a little bit more in terms of the topic. So today we're looking at getting a firm handle on costs. And I think at this stage, it's needless to say that cost management, financial management in general, is of utmost importance. I mean, not that it is ever unimportant, but I think the impetus on driving a solid financial ship at this stage is greater than it's ever been because of the nature of the market that we find ourselves in. Just let's have a look at this area of business. If we could just get a quick one-liner from each of you, what has made you specialize in this specific area of technology? I mean, there's so many areas of technology out there. What makes you focus on the financial aspect? Let's start with Andy.
Okay, obviously I find it challenging and rewarding, being able to look at ways in which to be able to bring down costs, etc., but also manage them better. But ultimately, I think one needs to focus on cash flow. Cash flow is very important in a business. So you might be just gliding along, for example, and making budget or maybe not making profit. But if that cash flow is maintained, your business can survive in any tough situation. It's about getting the right juggle and making sure one can move along with that. But yeah, it's rewarding and challenging, but you need to be creative and think out the box.
Good. How about you, Rhiedwaan?
Yeah, well, look, why I got involved in this environment is I see trends. I'm a very process-oriented person, so I understand what people need to do to get their businesses running. So I kind of focus on that, and I enjoy that. That's the part that I love seeing, is the way different people do different things. The same thing can be done, the same objective can be achieved in so many different ways, and that's what I get involved in, trying to understand how people and what their logic is behind making certain decisions.
Absolutely. All right. So Rhiedwaan, let's just stay with you for a bit here. I don't want us to talk technology at this point. I want us to talk what you mentioned, which is process. So you mentioned being a process guy. Let's have a look at policy and process for a second. Let's look at effective finance policy, especially in regards to getting approvals. We are in a very unique business context right now. We're all trying to run successful businesses, and we're trying to survive a very difficult and uncertain period. From a policy point of view and from a process point of view, what are some of the thoughts that you have and some of the guidance that you have for us in regards to how we should go about this process within the organization? Again, not talking technology.
Yeah, look, I think every business has got to spend money at the end of the day. You've got to spend to make money. So number one, you need to understand, when you're spending money, what are you buying? What are you getting? Why are you buying it? And when do you need it? I think that's the 3 W's that come into play when making any purchasing decision. Okay, you need to understand what this is and what you need to buy, why you're buying it, and when you need it. And then based on that, other factors come into play, like supplier, costs, and various other rules relating to buying an item. Every business, I think, has some sort of rules relating to how they spend their money. And sometimes there are businesses put in place. Sometimes it's manual processes, but it's processes nevertheless. And there's certain rules relating to who can spend what and when. So understanding what you want to buy and why you want to buy it is critical. And then next thing is where the finance people come involved is, do we have the money to spend on buying that item? So it's critical to understand that and then define that for business. So how different businesses define that is individual, and then putting that into a process of sort. And
all right.
Yeah, so
That's good. So this is very valuable information. Andy, I'm just going to jump over to you for a second here. I mean, Rhiedwaan's giving a good perspective in terms of managing the process and getting us to look at the fact that the spend and, that spend needs to be better coordinated, but it's not just a case of turning spend off. However, when we look at the market right now, we are seeing a lot of companies putting an embargo on spend or putting a spend freeze in place. And this is not uncommon, particularly at this time. What are your thoughts, your reflections, and your advice as a leader in regards to people who are completely stopping spend?
I think each business has got to analyze where they're having issues and identify possible key areas where they can actually create spend that's going to assist their business to actually grow in a time where economy is down, for example. We too are having to investigate and look at that, and thus embarking on this joint partnership with yourselves in this marketing and digital webinar that we're doing today. We need to see and utilize what is out there in order to be able to create and foster new relationships, think about business in a different way so that we can grow even though the market is dead, or not dead, but there's ways in which you can create spend without being frivolous, but be wise about it, but that spend can actually assist your business to grow. So that's where I would suggest people, they need to just look for the key areas where potentially, we can put money over here because it's going to generate this. It will help us to generate it. We might not see the benefit up front straight away, but 2 months down the line, we're going to reap the rewards. And it's about knowing how to get that right balance.
Okay, good. So it's more about the balance as opposed to a blanket policy that states that all spend should immediately be shut off. Sure. Good. Now, let's stay with you, Andy, for just a second here. Tell me, why do you feel in this remote work environment that we find ourselves in, why is it important to start looking at processes that extend beyond just dependence on email or a good effective spreadsheet? Why is it more important today to consider tools that go beyond the spreadsheet and email than it was, say, even 6 months ago?
Well, I think obviously it assists one to keep the flow going, to assist in maintaining and tracking what is happening, instead of relying on a person walking around to an office, dropping something in somebody's inbox, or in the basket, I should say, it's a paper, it gets buried amongst other papers. This type of thing can assist in moving those things along quicker, plus also provide governance, auditability, traceability, but at the end of the day, improve your supply chain so that you can ensure that you're going to get prompt deliveries, that you're going to not have a knock-on effect where you're supplying to a customer and now because your initial purchase hasn't been met because somebody's forgotten to do something, you end up with a knock-on effect, and your customer says, well, sorry, I can't buy from you anymore. So it's that, but also I think this type of IT function allows you to have more control around it. You also have one version of the truth, whereas with spreadsheets, in the financial world, everybody says the spreadsheets is 5 versions of the truth. So which one do you believe? So it's about making sure that everything is robust and in place to speed up everything and get the right game change going on.
Right. So let's take this concept further, Andy. Let's keep at this scenario of the remote work environment, and let's just say you have a situation where in the past you would simply walk over to Anne's desk and you would ask Anne to approve something or maybe give you a physical sign-off on a requisition. Obviously, the remote work environment does not allow a lot of that physical interaction. What are some of the changes we need to make from a people point of view? So looking at people, looking at the fact that Anne is no longer 2 desks away. Anne is not just a case of looking up and remembering that you have that task on your to-do list. What would you recommend that people think about when it comes to the changes beyond just the system? Now we're talking a lot more about the people changes. What are some of the effects that we have happening right now with teams and with people who are working remotely, given that they don't have the system around them anymore?
Obviously, one of the biggest things is adaptation and being able to rise to adapt to the situation at hand. I think applying your practice that you put in from a manual perspective can move over to an automated situation as well with workflow. Be diligent, check your emails constantly, watch for notifications that will come through that say you need to authorize something so that you can pass it on. Fortunately though, within this type of workflow environment, you can build in escalations, you can build in gatekeeping. So it warns other people in the chain to say, John hasn't done this, Joe hasn't done this, for example, so please chase. So physically, one would have to get up or go and move to an office or go and make a phone call, but John might be on holiday. What do you do then? So it's really about building in for those factors and making sure that they can be handled within the system, which they can, and making it a smoother transition. And getting people to recognize that, this remoteness or utilizing functionality in the IT world that has actually been there for a number of years already. It's just never been used by business because it's been untrusted. There's no confidence in it, but I can assure you it's robust, it's strong. And I think with COVID, some businesses have been forced to go into this remoteness. And I think with Teams meetings, etc., and webinars and that, it's shown that it can happen. And so there's no reason why it can't change.
All right, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you are saying that we need to look at the way in which we work being beyond dependence and reliance purely on email. There needs to be some kind of workflow that is set up that keeps us from having to depend on walking over to Ant's desk. So obviously, because we can't walk over to Ant's desk, we now need to have better systems and protocol in place, and we need to have some kind of workflow engine that's sitting behind the scenes that takes the requisition to Anne automatically and doesn't rely on you having to do too much manual intervention. So we are basically, in a nutshell, being forced out of old habits because COVID has imposed upon us something that we never really had to deal with in the past. Would you say that that's a fair-ish summary?
Yeah, yes, definitely. That's along the right track, yeah. I mean, obviously with the workflow, you can build in escalations, etc., to assist and make sure that it flows seamlessly.
Yeah. All right. So let's have a look at let's go back this time to Rhiedwaan, and we're talking about some obvious points about remote work driving this new impetus, driving the impetus towards a better automated type of solution in the workplace where costs managed better by sending a workflow that's pre-set up to the relevant people for approval. So that's what we're discussing. We're discussing the simplicity of being able to employ sound policy and sound process through the use of automation. Why, beyond just this obvious, hey, it's COVID, we all have to work remotely, why is this conversation so much more important today than it was yesterday? Rhiedwaan.
Look, we work in the digital age. We live in the digital age. So the reality is, businesses needed to, before you could track someone's ability to do a job by the fact that they were at their desk, or they clocked in the office at 8 o'clock and they left at 5 o'clock. Now in the world today, that's no longer valid because the world's so small. People take so much work home. You can't measure or judge somebody's ability to do a job by the fact that they're at the office or not. They could be doing things from home at night all over the show when they're on holiday. I don't think there is a thing called holiday anymore. I think the world's so small that everything goes with you. Your phone nowadays becomes a tool that you can do things that you couldn't do with 20 years ago, or if not 10 years ago, you couldn't do some of the things remotely that you can do now with your cell phone, which you carry with you everywhere. I mean, so I think businesses the world has changed, and I think businesses are, specifically now with the COVID scenario, is that businesses has forced to adopt that technology. Like Andrew was saying, has been there for a while, but it's highlighted the benefits of the technology, and it's now shown that reality is people can work from home. They can perform a function, they can do things, and businesses are starting to accept that can become a normal way of functioning and still be effective and efficient, and in certain instances actually more efficient, because you're giving the employee or the person that's doing the job peace of mind. Like at the moment, like I said, I've got kids at home, I need to play a bit of a teacher, a little whatever. I can do both. I can do my job, my function effectively, as well as be a teacher to my kids while they're home, and utilizing that ability to work from anywhere to benefit not only my work life, but also my family.
Right. And Rhiedwaan, I'm really glad that you're bringing this people aspect through, because I think we don't talk about it enough, especially as senior professionals and senior leaders. There's a hesitation often to admit to the fact that there are these pressing priorities, and this unique working environment is in fact very challenging, and we need to, as businesses and as business leaders, account for those few things that we didn't account for before. And the reality is that this isn't just a case of not being at the office. There's a lifestyle change, and there's a work style change. And it's not just about where we're working from. It's no longer a location question. It is a lifestyle question. So I really like that input. Adil, I did see your question come through, and I'm going to be taking it up in just a second. I think just before we go to Adil's question, there's something I want to square off, and I think I'm going to, maybe Andy, you can give me your thoughts on this. The thing that I'd like to clarify for myself is that we're talking a lot about process, and we're talking about a lot about good financial protocol or good financial governance, if you want to term it that. It's all about getting a good quality workflow with the right levels of approval that's set up in a very easy to manage system, a very simple, a very light system, not something that's big and heavy, and it's not an ERP necessarily. It can work with an ERP, but it can be a very light workflow. So taking all of these things into account, from my knowledge, an ERP is capable, an enterprise resource planning tool is capable of managing budgets, and it's capable of allocating cost centers to different people at the will of finance, and then those people can only spend up to a certain limit. So that's a way of controlling expenditure. Why are we saying why do we need to do more than that? Why do we now suddenly have to extend beyond just cost centers?
Well, if you put it in this way, cost centers ultimately, at the end of the day, it's after the result. It's after something has happened. So your spend has actually happened when you read it in your general ledger, or if you look at a set of finances. So you want to prevent things from happening before it hits your bottom line and before you've actually made a commitment to a supplier. And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, when you do a purchase order or place an order on a supplier, it's like writing out a blank check if it's not vetted correctly. So if you can circumvent that from hitting your bottom line before you know about it, the better. So these workflows and automation functions allow you to build in all of that beforehand. So all the checks and the stops are already there. So somebody initiates something and says, I need to purchase this. It's going to cost me 10, 12 grand. Do I have, as in my own personal capacity, the authorization to do that? Or no, my next in line has got to get my supervisor or superior has to vet it and check it. So even before a purchase order is committed to a supplier, it's gone through the whole process of governance. It's gone through that auditability, accountability, etc. Do I need it? When do I need it? All of that's done. So it gives a business a comfort zone to know that all the checks and the stops have been put in place before I actually have to now go and receive those goods and ultimately pay my supplier for them. And 99% of the time, it's the correct thing, it's done right, it's at the right cost. So when it lands on your doorstep, you're comfortable in knowing I don't have an issue. So that's essentially where the difference lies. Yeah.
All right. So that's very clear,
Yeah,
Andy, and I think
if I
that
can,
it's very good to cover that. Sorry, Rhiedwaan, did you want to say something?
yeah, I want to just add. Also,
Okay.
with the flow that we're talking, you're getting the person who has the requirement to make the purchase. They raise the requisition. It's right there at the coalface. It's not going some guy filling in a piece of paper, giving it to a buyer who then needs to. They do it right there, right then. They know what the need is. They can describe it accurately, and then put it into a flow, go to the correct person to authorize. So you're not getting second-hand information coming through, and this one saying, I need this, but that, and it's right there at the coalface. You pull it in, you can disseminate the ability for not decision making per se, but action lower down. So action can be taken right at the coalface versus at a higher level.
All right. Rhiedwaan, I think what you just said is absolutely critical. And I just want to, I have these moments where I realize some things and I always like making a big deal about it. To me, what you've just said is that there's a couple of points inside that. The first big one to me is that we talk about this theme that you cannot cut costs blindly at the stage. In fact, if you blindly cut costs at this stage, that could be the reason for the business going under. So it's about how do we make sure that the right costs are being put forward, and how do we make sure that we don't just blindly lose sight of a cost that could in fact aid the business. And one of the ways that we can work around this is by empowering our people, not disempowering them at this stage. Instead of saying to them, you're not allowed to spend, it's about saying that the people who in fact have the most information about what needs to be spent on, those are the people in the cold face. Those are the people who are on the front lines of the company, and they need to be the ones that have a say. We cannot terminate their voice. We cannot assume that that those in the ivory tower have the best decision-making capability, but we need all of them. We need the chain of command to be connected all the way from the front line to the senior decision makers, and we need to make sure that everyone's working in a synchronized flow line. So this is about empowerment of people and not the disempowerment of people. And I think in the remote work context, because we don't have that luxury of just walking into a meeting room with 2 or 3 key people from the floor where we can have these conversations, being able to systematically string together the right people on the right command line is critical now more than ever. But that command line must inherently empower the person who's requesting money for something. It has to empower, it cannot disempower. And I think that's the beauty of what we're discussing today. This system and this technology and this format of working is so critical. The hallmarks of it is that we need increased employee engagement in a situation of fewer costs or tighter cost management. And we need effective cost decision-making, not blanket or blind cost decision-making. So those are 2 big takeaways. At this stage, I want to just make some comments on that are coming through here. Malejo says that business process optimization is also critical. There's a need to simplify, standardize, and re-engineer, as mentioned, and automate end-to-end processes. And I think, Malejo, this is a very important point, that as part of this conversation, of doing these wonderful step changes systematically, we're going to get a byproduct which is improved and enhanced business continuity, business process optimization, and all of this comes as a result of systemizing and automating and putting more process in place that's going to work with people and empower people, as opposed to just depending on people bumping into each other in order to get a job done. So that's a very important point. Let's have a look at Adil's question. I like the question, so I wanted to pause on it, before we answered. I'm gonna share the question in a second, and while I do, I want everyone to be aware that we live and die based on the feedback that we receive. Your feedback is critical to us. We cannot continue running these events unless we get good feedback from you guys. So we will be putting in a link into the question section. I see Terrence just added it right now. So if you wouldn't mind clicking the link that has appeared in your Q&A box, and please take a second to provide some feedback to us. We haven't ended the discussion. We are still going ahead with the discussion, but I'm letting you guys know before you jump off that we do require that you complete this, and we depend on your feedback, and we do make changes based on that. So please take a second to complete that feedback. So now let's look at Adil's point here. Can these systems be used on Android and iPhone as an accessibility point, and what is available? So this is going a little bit deep into the tech side of things, not really deep tech, but definitely from an interface point of view. How can we make these systems more accessible within the within the domain of it being still a corporate system, a system that is used by the business? How do we make this more accessible? Let's have Rhiedwaan answer this one.
Okay, well, look, I think that's critical. Any system nowadays must be accessible from on any device, and I think that is a mantra I think our business live by. Platforms nowadays is irrespective. It's at the end of the day, you need to be able to access it on whatever platform you're on. Platform is a personal choice. Some people like iPhone, some people like Android, some people like Windows. Doesn't really make a difference. It must be accessible, and it must be accessible from anywhere. Obviously, security and making sure that the right people get access to it only is also critical. So there's decision making that need to come to play there, but it needs to be accessible from anywhere. And technology like this it's there. It's available. We can do it. It's been around for many years. Tested, and also integrate with tools that people like using, like email. So you don't necessarily only have it on a single platform, have it on multiple platforms. So the system can be chasing you no matter where you are and what tool you're using.
Okay, good. So in a simple way, either app-based or browser-based, we will still be able to access a request that comes through. We will still be able to hit an approve or a decline. That's still something that's feasible, right, Rhiedwaan?
100%. And I mean, like I was trying to say earlier on, that notification could come to you via email, SMS, or you can log on to say what you do. So the system can chase you from anywhere, so you can't hide, like I was saying earlier.
All right. Okay, good. One of the worries that we get whenever we start talking technology and whenever we start talking about big systems is obviously the big question of, am I going to become beholden to a supplier by doing this now? Am I in bed with one particular supplier that I'm now beholden to for the next 20 years? These are worries that people face, and they often share this with us. What's your take about this? Rhiedwaan, I mean, I know I'm giving you a hard time with a lot of questions here. Do you want to give this a stab?
No. Creation that applies no matter what you buy. Okay, whether you're buying a television, a car, always going to be beholden to a supplier of sort, because somebody's going to make it at the end of the day, and they're going to hold that IP related to that product. The logic rather should be in asking the right questions. Is the supplier, is what I'm buying what I need, number one? Number two, is it fulfilling the requirement that I have? Okay, and the technology out there, is it future-proof? So you should rather understand the process of deciding on a supplier rather than being afraid of being beholden to a supplier. I mean, you buy a car nowadays, you're beholden to that person, to that company that made that car, But it doesn't stop people from buying cars, And you go through a decision-making process of buying anything in life, and ask yourself the right questions, and make sure that you get the answers, and you use the technology available to do the research. I mean, there's internet available, there's experts like yourselves and various other things. You go and do reviews, do the research, make sure that the decision you're making when you're buying something is the right decision, and who you're buying it from is also right for you, for the individual, because everybody's different.
All right, so let's take that concept a bit further. Now, a lot of companies have already made investments in ERP technology. They have their financial system, they have their general ledger. Would this now mean that I cannot use a system like the one that we are discussing, like this workflow solution? Does this in any way, the fact that I'm, for lack of a better term, I'm beholden to an existing supplier who's supplying my existing general ledger, does that stop me from being able to now go and use workflow technology to manage the permissions to do with spend requests?
Definitely
Andy,
not.
let's go with Andy. Because Andy's on the screen, that's why.
Okay, sorry there. Yeah, no, we're not. It's not beholden. This technology can interface seamlessly with any ERP system. So it has a core set of functions and principles behind it, using, in some cases, what we call business objects. So it will allow for the two to marry seamlessly. So no, you don't have to move away from your current financials or your current ERP system to utilize this. This really goes hand in hand with any kind of product out there. It doesn't have to be changed, etc. I think Rhiedwaan also wanted to maybe make a comment there on that, but we can make it seamlessly interface.
It can, 100%. As Andrew was saying, seamlessly interfaces is critical because you want the two systems to talk to each other. But these scenarios creation where some people don't have systems, and they also want to put a process in place. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that system must be able to interface with an existing system, or if you don't have an existing system, be able to operate on its own as well. And allow you the ability to still control that cost, whether you have a big, expensive ERP system that you spend millions on, or you have a simple accounting package that's in the cloud somewhere. It must be able to offer you value irrespective.
All right. So if I'm going to take a big stab at summarizing here. And guys, just before I provide a quick summary of what Rhiedwaan just said, please, again, a quick reminder that your webinar feedback link is sitting in the Q&A chat box. Please take a second, click that. It's hardly going to take you 30 seconds to complete. Please, if you wouldn't mind completing our survey. So Rhiedwaan, just back to what you've explained. So are you saying that right now it actually doesn't even matter whether or not we're using a big fancy ERP? It doesn't matter about the back-end system. You're saying that it is important for us to consider having some kind of workflow technology in place that sits independently from any system at all, that regulates the process and the procedure of permissions in regards to spend. And this is something that doesn't necessarily require, or even it doesn't necessitate having some kind of associated ERP or an associated financial management tool.
You hit the nail on the head, Christian. Yeah, so you don't necessarily need a big expensive backend system. You can run the system. You should be able to run independently as well. And I mean, the idea that spend control is only for big companies is a fallacy. It's a lie. Every company needs to control their spend, and whether you a small business, if you can manage that and make sure your processes are being followed, and have a system like this to ensure the process is being followed, it makes the accountant's life so much easier at the end of the day, because he knows when the spend has come through, it's come through with the correct authorizations, and the system we're talking about here can operate with or without a big ERP system.
All right, this is very good insight. So obviously you are making a very strong case for why this is important in business, period. It is not about accounting. It is about procedure. It's about permissions. It's about empowerment of people. So do you have any instances or industries where you feel like this is very, very, very necessary? It's completely compelling. You know, like what's your take on, from an industry point of view? Is there any industry that can't do without this right now? Is that real in your experience? Rhiedwaan, sorry, my bad. I should have said so.
Yeah, so I mean, you broke up there a little bit. Okay, so look, obviously our background, my business background is more small manufacturing industries, and it forms a crucial part in these businesses. But there's no reason why it can't apply to any business where they require some sort of spend, and to have clarity and understanding, and like we said, empowering people to be able to initiate the process and put down their wants and requirements. I think that applies to any business, you know, and I think any good management team would want the correct information to make decisions on, and if the information is coming from right down at the coalface, what better information and that. So scenarios, there's various industries where this can apply. Like I said, we've applied it specifically in small manufacturing businesses, but there are other service-related industries and other financial industries where the rules apply as well.
All right, and just to probe a little bit into this, is there any business or any type of industry where you feel like it's the company is just going to be too small for this solution to be relevant? Is there anyone who should be saying, actually, we don't need to bother with this? Rhiedwaan, I'll just keep giving you a hard time.
No, I don't think so. I don't look. Obviously, if it's a one-man show, you are the coalface. And if there's more than one person in the business, then I think depending how good your communication is, then maybe not. But generally speaking, if there is a scenario where a decision maker has people working for them, doing tasks, then I think this system will come in very useful. And at the end of the day, it collects the information and stores it for you. So when it comes time for audit or rounding up the year, having a look back, you'll be able to look back with proper statistical information to understand where you spent money and why. And the important part here is the why.
Okay, this is good. This is good advice. So, Andy, I think we've given Rhiedwaan quite a lot of the hot seat. So I think we're going to turn some attention over to you now. I think that there's some very big pearls of wisdom that's coming through, and I'm really enjoying this. And I hope that our attendees are enjoying it as well. And of course, we'll know whether they are enjoying it because they are going to complete their feedback. The link is in the Q&A box. But just getting back to the discussion here. For me, it's becoming very clear that this is no longer something that lives in the domain of the large company. This discussion and this type of spend management applies in any organization where you're trying to empower people to get out there and keep working and to keep getting stuff done, and you don't want to slow them down. You don't want to add more bureaucracy to the table. You actually want to free people up and you want to get things done quickly. So any environment where you have a handful of people who are actually getting out and getting stuff done, but they're still looking to work in harmony, this would still apply. Would this be a fair assessment, and do you have any other pieces of advice associated with that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair comment that you made there, and it does apply. I think also any kind of organization, educational, government, etc., can benefit from this in applying different procedures to the workflow so that you've got your governance happening, you've got your checks in place, but also at the end of the day, it's really a database of information as well. So it's not just a process flow that takes along and says, okay, well, who's my next in command, etc. It gives you an analysis and a breakdown at the end of the day saying where your spend has been, what you've spent it on, how often are you purchasing something, is it the right thing that you should be purchasing, because out of it comes analysis as well. So you can, in a very short time frame, see what you're doing and if it's the right thing that you should be doing as well. So it's an enabler as well. It's not just a disabler. So it's there to enable and assist the business in moving forward and going through a transition like we're doing now in the COVID.
All right. And then Andy, while we have you here, let me just go ahead and ask you this one. What advice would you have for an attendee who's listening to you right now and who's probably thinking, I'm part of a big company, we already have measures in place, and this could be so empowering to our team and this could be hugely valuable, but I just don't even know how to start the conversation internally. I don't even know what I would need to do. It's like, it's too much for us because we're this big company and there's no way we're going to buy new technology, or there's no way we're going to invest in new workflow. What advice would you have for such a person who's listening?
Yeah, difficult maybe, but not something that can't be solved. Setting up a workflow of this kind is not that expensive. It can be put in it relatively cheaply. And if you take your existing manual processes that are in place and just map them into this workflow, you won't have an issue. You can initiate conversation with people like us or any other people out there to see where it can best fit the business. And it's not something that's going to cost an arm and a leg to initiate and put into place. So talking to the main people in the business, the financial people, the managing directors, etc., and suggesting to them that we can enhance our existing systems by functionality like this.
All right. So, Andy, would it be a fair suggestion? One second, Rhiedwaan. I'm going to get to you in just a second. Would it be fair, from what you've just said, to invite people to still get in touch, even if they find themselves in a scenario where they don't necessarily know how to go about communicating this internally, and they don't necessarily think that it's even a possibility? Would you still invite the opportunity for people to get in touch with you?
Definitely, yes. We're not here just to sell and market product. We're here to give knowledge and share knowledge and help people move forward in their own businesses as well. We do that a lot with our existing customers. It's all about sharing what's happening out there in the market and how best it can or can't assist somebody. It's always good to be able to assist companies in growing, irrespective of the outcome.
All right, so that's really, really valuable. Rhiedwaan, I know that I cut you off a little bit there. Do you want to just come back on the line and let me know what you were saying?
Yeah, no, I was also going to say to customers where they feel they're in a big business, look at a single department. You could put a process flow on a single department. Doesn't have to go on to every department. If in bigger businesses, every department or every area has got different buying rules. So you could go and select a department and set this workflow up for that department and see how it works for you and see what benefit you get out of it. Especially in like you said, with people working at home. I think people working at home and collecting information at the coalface nowadays is critical. So don't be afraid if you feel in a big business and how are we going to change this big ship? Choose a small part, use a little bit, and workflow that small department or small area and measure the benefit that you get out of it.
All right. Thank you, Rhiedwaan. And I think that's very good advice. So basically, the summary there is that, we don't have to boil the ocean. We can start small. We can probably show some wins in a particular area. And if there is a leader out there, you don't have to be necessarily a financial leader. You could be the leader of a department, and you may want to bring your particular costs down, or you want to bring your costs into better management for yourself. And you could go ahead and implement this just within your area as part of your business process workflow. This doesn't have to be a workflow that is authorized by finance. It doesn't have to even integrate necessarily into a financial system. This could be just a system that is implemented to change behaviors within an area of the business itself. So this is not a finance-only conversation. This is about good fiscal discipline. It's about good management and good management practice. So we don't necessarily have to make this a big slog that needs to be sold all the way into the top of the company. We could implement this anywhere within the organization. Fair summary, Rhiedwaan?
100%. You hit the nail on the head.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's give our attendees the opportunity to make some comments and ask questions. And we do have an interesting question from Alvin, not necessarily specific to do with costs here, specifically related to costs. I think it's a general question, so let's see who would like to take it. The question is, how is it that people are now so much busier now that they are working from home? So this is just a random question, so maybe we'll go to Andy to give his thoughts here.
Yeah, maybe not so difficult. During the first portion of the lockdown of the COVID, my immediate thought was that everything was going to be quiet and smooth sailing, and not by any means. I think with remote connectivity, it forced businesses to communicate with each other, utilizing team meetings or Zoom or any other functionality. So initially, for the first 2 weeks, I was bombarded with team meetings, conference calls, etc. So it was very hectic. But yeah, I think people are investigating and seeing what remote technology can do for them, and it's helping, I think. It will smooth out later on in the time, and people will get to know how certain things should function, should work, scheduling things, and communicating better with their own teams as well by setting up specific time frames in which to do so. But yeah, it's a good environment to be in at the moment. I don't see it being too challenging.
Yeah, maybe I can chip in there as well.
Absolutely.
It's we live in a global world. You know, the world is trading 24 hours a day. You know, we might be in at night here in South Africa, but it's day somewhere else in the world. So yes, I agree with Alvin. The world it is more busier, and because technology has brought the ability to work from anywhere, it's going to seem that way. But yeah, you gotta draw your lines at some point and say, well, this is kind of important family time, personal time, you know, and manage that. But note that the tools are there to enable business to operate, or you to operate effectively 24/7.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, while we wait for more questions here, if there are any, just a comment as an extension of what you were saying, Rhiedwaan, I think we need to make peace with the fact that COVID and the whole work from home change may have initially, you know, we might have gotten the idea that things are actually slowing down, when in fact, all it was doing is it was just taking all of this work pressure that we all face, and it's just channeling it into a domain that is different to the workplace, but it's still channeling work, and it's still channeling a whole lot of pressure, and that it's just now spilled over. That pressure has caused a spillover into our personal environments and into our, in many instances, even our personal time, because now there's no definitive bound between the office and home as it was in the past. So I think that this pressure didn't change. In fact, if anything, the pressure grew because a lot of business leaders have been concerned about the future of their company. So they've been working even harder, and they've been working their people even harder. So I do feel that the pressure mounted, and it's now causing a bit of a spillover effect into people's lives. And I think that, you know, to bring it back to our conversation, I really think that this pressure is not necessarily going to disappear. It's about how do we channel the pressure into the right areas, and do we make that pressure become something constructive, or do we make it become something that's destructive? And to me, the hallmark of that decision is whether we give tools to our people that empower them, or whether we just put pressure, and pressure in the absence of tools results in stress. If you just say to someone, you got to do more, but if you're not equipping them, it's going to make the person break down. And my message, as for myself to the people on this call, is that look out for that. Look out for leadership where you are experiencing lots of pressure, but you are not being equipped to handle that pressure. You could be equipped in two primary ways. You could be given better know-how, and you could also be given better tools. If you're not getting either, at least one of those tools, or one of the two, either tools or learning, then you are going to be in a situation where you're going to be likely to break down. So beyond just the context of getting a handle on costs, you know, I think there's an important message, and Alvin might have inadvertently opened a can of worms. If you are getting pressure to do a better job, to show better return to your business, to lead your area better, and if you're feeling that pressure, you need to have the associated tools to get you to do that in the remote work context. The pressure to get work done is not gone. Sadly, COVID might have given that apparency, but it's not the truth. The pressure for work to get done has not dissipated. The fact that people are not present in work environments does not mean that work pressure has dissipated. Work pressure has increased. So at this time, more than ever before, we need to invest in the right tools and technologies to support our people so they can handle that pressure and deliver results and not break down as a result. So that's my 2 cents as a bit of a closing on that point. So I think on that note, let's end off with 2 quick wrap-up points from Andy and Rhiedwaan. We'll go to you in a second. For the attendees, please make sure that you complete the webinar feedback as we go through this final wrap-up. and we're definitely going to finish within the hour. So let's start with a quick parting shot from you, Andy, and then we'll end up with Rhiedwaan.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just a case of people need to embrace IT, and move forward with what's happening and change and adapt as quickly as possible. I mean, look, remote connectivity, etc., cell phones, social media, it's been around for a long time, but it's just never really maybe been pushed and channeled into the business environment. But I think we need to grab and hold on to the things that are coming with IT. There's lots of tools out there to assist people in order to make their lives easier and better. I don't think like you said, Karishan, I don't think from a pressure perspective it's going to change. It may even get worse. We are in a 24/7 environment, whether we like it or not, but it's best knowing how to handle it. Sure, watch governance on cash flow, costs, etc. Yes, apply diligence, but where it can be used effectively in the business and getting you going, then use it wisely.
That's good advice. Thank you, Andy. Rhiedwaan, closing remark.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was going to say that we as business leaders need to empower employees. We need to give them the ability to make certain decisions and take that decisions away from necessarily a single person, disseminate that ability lower down, but in the same process, put the checks in place that make sure that the correct decision still gets made. So in the world today where everybody's working from everywhere, give them the ability to give staff or the people in your organization the ability to make decisions and put the process in place to make sure that the correct decision gets made. I think that's for me is critical at the moment in time, especially with people not being able to walk into each other at the water fountain and talk about things. So yeah, good to go.
All right. Thank you, Rhiedwaan. Thank you, everyone, for attending this event. It's been a fantastic event. We've had some golden nuggets throughout the event. Look out for the upload of this show to our YouTube channel. We'll also be uploading an audio file to Spotify and Apple Music. Very excited to get your continued feedback, and thank you so much for attending. Before you drop off, please make sure you've completed our webinar feedback, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time with another event. Thank you so much.